Okay. I'm not sure that we need to introduce the participants, but I'll do so out of politeness. The one sitting farthest from me, Major General in Reserves, Tibon, Noam Tibon. How many years did you serve? How many years were you did you wear uniform? 35 years, but your true amazing glory you gained after you took off your uniform and you simply drove down to the Gaza border region to fight as a retiree. And Major General in Reserves Amos Gilead, if I'll tell you everything I know about him, that we won't have time left for anything else, so I'll spare you that. He's Mr. Intelligence, COGAT, head of the political division and former director of Mossad, Tamir Pardo. I am now going to start with an identical question, and you need to answer with one word, either yes or no. Prepare your mics, please. Guys, I'm only a staff sergeant, but now you're all going to do what I'm telling you. Tamir Pardo, is Israel under existential threat? Tamir Pardo, yes. Amos, yes. Noam, yes. Okay, now's the time to run away, ladies and gentlemen. Could you please elaborate? Do you need any further elaboration? Isn't it obvious? Let me help you. Is it under existential risk because of everything? I spoke with Gadi Eisenkot that the Iranians will soon have a bomb, or because of what's happening inside, or both. Unfortunately, today it's both. Everything is happening simultaneously. Domestically, we have utter chaos, and nothing is managed in this country, and I mean nothing. And what concerns me, and I'll talk about things from a security angle, and this is something that didn't come up here. In 1967, Gamal Abdel Nasser shut down the Straits of Tiran. That was the casus belli for the war that was later called the 73 War. In October 8th, the Houthis shut down Bab el-Mandab. It's a bit farther away, and ever since we don't have a port in Eilat, it's dry. Not one ship, not one boat enters that port. But that wasn't a casus belli for anything. It's not even reported on as a news item in the media. I don't think it's been reported more than once. Maybe once every 2 or 3 months there's a very brief news item because a ship that somehow related to Israel was attacked, and there is no solution. So that is the mirror that we see in front of us. It's right in front of our eyes. Gaza, the north, Judea and Samaria. When I hear that assault helicopters are operating in Tulkarem, let's try and understand what we're even talking about. There's a war going on in all arenas. If somebody once talked about a multi-arena war, it is now a super multi-arena war, all the way from Iran to Gaza on one end and Gaza on the other. How do you view this? I'll tell you what's the reason for concern and why we do stand a chance. First of all, there was a colossal failure of the Intel Directorate 50 years and 6 hours after the terrible failure that pales in comparison to this failure. In the previous failure, the IDF rose to its feet and managed to defeat 2 Arab armies and bring peace. And today, the Iranians, these bastards, are sitting there and saying, hold on, maybe our plan to annihilate Israel is feasible. And for me, that's shocking because there was no justification to what had happened unless we're talking about in-depth processes. To the credit of the Intel, both the Intel Directorate and the ISA, they warned the Prime Minister their professional favors because it happened after such a period. And then the entire construct that has been designed, it reminds me of that pest, you know, there's that pest that eats up palm trees from the inside and then they collapse. And there's an Israeli high-tech company that invented sensors. Yes, but it doesn't work, and that's what happened on October 7th. It's a good analogy. Why am I concerned about the future? Because the IDF has proven immense power. The former Chief of General Staff just described it magnificently, and then you asked him the personal question, and his answer truly moved me. But where's the wisdom here? There's no wisdom. What? Will govern Gaza? Will destroy Judea and Samaria? Will directly govern Gaza, and then will be taken to the international courts in The Hague? It's nice to be a tourist in The Hague, but not a prisoner. Are we going to ruin our relations with the U.S.? Is there any replacement for our relationship with the U.S.? If we continue on this path, then I'm concerned. But we're now at the brink of the abyss. But if we stop, then we still have hope because we're still very powerful. We can reenact our strength, but we can also go downhill. And this is what truly concerns me. Noam, on October 7th, I saw the fiasco with my very own eyes. And it's been such a long time since then. And what truly concerns me is that the government of the fiasco and the massacre, which is an extremist radical government, and it's the first time we're conducting such a complicated war, and you feel that what's leading the government is not the question what's good for the State of Israel's security, but rather political considerations related to the Prime Minister's survival. They refuse to hold any strategic discussion. They refuse to discuss the day after. They're not taking care of the hostage problem. So 2 regions in the State of Israel have been completely abandoned. So when you see all that, you understand that we've been fighting for a very long time. We've shed so much blood, and yet we haven't reached any of the achievements we declared. We did not bring back all the hostages. We did not destroy Hamas, and we did not manage to get the people living in the south of Israel and the north of Israel to return to their homes. And the vision, ostensibly, of the Prime Minister is an endless war which will ruin our while ruining our relationship with the U.S. This means that Israel is going in a very bad direction, and this is what truly worries me. Let's pause for a second, and we're going to continue this discussion because it is important, but still I think that at least 2 of the 3 of you were very active and are still very dominant in the call for a commission of inquiry on the submarines and all the petitions to the High Court of Justice. So I'd like to start with you, Tamir. How do you see the recommendations issued today? 5 people were warned, the Prime Minister, Bogi Ya'alon, accusing them of harming state national security. Do you think that the Commission is delivering the goods? It's a sad day. It's a sad day for everyone, for every Israeli citizen. If you read what the Commission of Inquiry wrote about a Prime Minister who is currently serving as Prime Minister after 2 years of investigation, it's appalling. It's shocking. I think it hasn't even concluded its work. It issued warning letters. It hasn't finalized its work. But if we look at what's written in these warning letters, I don't even know how to define it. It's terrible. So it also includes somebody who replaced you in your position. It includes somebody who was then the head of the NSC. You are guarding the brand of a director of the Mossad. Yes, I'm trying to. And yet Yossi Cohen's name, Amos Bogi Ya'alon's name, he's one of you guys. He's one of those. I mean, there's a tragic event. I don't even know what to compare it to. He's the one who invested the biggest amount of energy in establishing this commission of inquiry, and ultimately he's one of those who have been warned. Look, I don't think the public understands this commission of inquiry. It's a submarine commission, so they're underwater, they work beneath the radar, and yes, now it's risen up. What did it discuss? How you do the force buildup of the military and the security establishment? It's called the submarine commissions. They're various secret aspects that cannot be discussed, but there's one thing that's clear. Let's say if you come to the Chief of General Staff and say to him, we need 6,000 submarines. Okay, so buy 6,000 submarines. Each one costs 2 billion shekels, and with that amount of money, you can set up several divisions. Is it going to be the maritime forces that will win the war, the ground forces, the Air Force force? Design force buildup is something critical, and the IDF's position is always formulated by the Chief of General Staff. He decides because he takes everything into account, but what this commission discussed in some very significant flaws in the entire procedure and planning of force design, force design, force buildup is equal to the strength of the IDF and the security establishment, and the Commission of Inquiry issued a warning at the highest possible level. They're saying to the Prime Minister, you are a threat, you are a risk to national security, and we can see it right now in front of our eyes. It's nothing political. I'm not saying anything political here. I think that the decisions, the interim decisions today, just like Tamir said, are critical because they exactly reflect what we're discussing here today, and that's why it's important. Noam, you're from the ground forces. You don't know much about submarines, but maybe if we look at things from the macro perspective, because Gadi Eisenkot said that what we have here is a prime minister who has personal responsibility on the disaster on Meron Mountain, and also responsibility for the fire at Carmel Mountain, and responsibility for the submarines. And if a commission of inquiry will be appointed for October 7th, I don't think it would be a far-fetched gamble that they'll find his responsibility there. Yet we don't see an end. I don't see him leaving his office before 2026, if at all.
Look, when they say the Prime Minister is a threat to national security of the State of Israel, I think the words speak for themselves. I think Gadi Eisenkot said, what he said in his very polite manner, but the response, the Prime Minister sabotaged the possibility of bringing home hostages in a switch deal, in a trade deal. The Prime Minister has never taken responsibility for this failure. He led the concept of the Hamas as an asset, suitcases of billions of dollars flowing to the Hamas over the years, allowing it to grow as a terror organization. Now, this is so painful a point, because if the Prime Minister had taken responsibility and resigned after the previous failures, we may never have experienced October 7. Now, we did have the 7th of October. Netanyahu is the Prime Minister at that time. And now we see the results of this extreme government that he's assembled. And this has to be said clearly. It's not only on their watch and their responsibility. That's true enough, because I already on the 8th of October, the next day, when I understood the ramifications of the failure, I said that everybody who's responsible for that failure, the entire upper echelon of the military, of the ISA, everything that has to do with intelligence, but first and foremost, the entire government of Israel and Netanyahu at its head has to leave. And if they don't leave, the moment they didn't leave, the next failure is just coming, and we will all pay the price. Tamir, I want to give you a hard time in regards to what Amnon said. The head of the intelligence directorate resigned, and the Gaza division commander resigned, and there are some people saying that the head of the ISA and so forth, they took responsibility, but they shouldn't resign before there are new elections or before the politicians take responsibility. Would you agree? I think that I know Herzliya. I've known him for over 30 years. And I know that he is a remarkable commander. I think that what happened, and it doesn't matter who was the commander, keeping on for 9 months almost after such an event is not the right thing to do. It's not right for the country. It's not right for the IDF. There's a real problem here. A real problem. On the 7th, 8th, 9th of October, the thought was at the time, hey, wait a second, now first of all, the government should go, and then after the operative echelons should go. But I think that as a commander, continuing on after an event of this nature, it's hard to be a commander after that. I'm not entirely sure it's appropriate you should continue to command after that. I think the IDF didn't have any problem to have sort of lateral moves and continue the war on the 8th of October with with government officials who hadn't been any part of the world. Is this the war? Is this true of the ISA? I mean, we're talking about democracy, but and the IDF Chief of General Staff has different position. But the moment that I say that there is the difficulty in replacing a leader of a service during war because of some political consideration, that means I don't believe in Israeli democracy. I would be afraid to say such a thing. I believe still that Israeli democracy is strong enough to deal with replacing people. And even if there's a prime minister who's irresponsible, the state and the public are strong enough to deal with replacing him. And the ISA has enormous force. There are amazing people in that service, amazing people, security professionals who work night and day to keep Israel safe. And I don't think that a prime minister can endanger the ISA or any other security organization. We have good people here. And if somebody tries to do something wrong, I believe the public will address that. I have faith. Do you agree? I think the only solution is a national commission of inquiry with a schedule subject to the Supreme Court. Because, that's the only way to go about it. Because if the prime minister continues and the head of the ISA leaves and somebody else is replaced, and by the way, I think Tamir and Noam would agree that the head of the SIC is an amazing person and a defender of democracy and a real professional. But our democracy is so weak that one person that we put in that role who will be the wrong person could have terrible ramifications. So we need a national inquiry committee or commission. We need to give them a schedule. We need to have interim outcomes within and recommendations within a few months, and that has to be applicable to everybody from the prime minister down. It's not as if I'm against him. I just want this country to be saved. You asked me if I was worried. If they said that the prime minister has to take the responsibility, as I see it, and as my colleagues described, that he should be the first to go, and after him, we have to replace several people, and yes, adjust. I came from a hierarchical structure. We all came from hierarchical structures. There was a chain of command. Command is, first of all, based on trust, that the soldiers believe in the commander at their lead. The political arena is a complete mess. It's chaos. I can't even describe it. But a security system, whether it's the IDF or the ISA, if you lose trust in the leadership, whether it's a company commander or a brigade commander or the chief of general staff, when you lose the trust of your soldiers, you cannot command. Now 3 years waiting for the verdict of an inquiry commission that the government doesn't even want to establish this commission. It could have done it on the 7th of October, that morning. Could have concluded its work within a week in the critical issues that need to be debated. And an inquiry commission doesn't need to come to conclusions. It has to understand what happened and how it happened. And that can be done very easily. But nobody wants to do it. Well, Noam has already stated his opinion. You said you had to replace the whole government. But let's look at the global stage. You, as head of the Mossad, you dealt with an Amos. Of course, your position, this was your forte. And it seems that the most concerning thing of all of the very concerning things is this rapid collapse, unbelievable collapse of this historical and powerful alliance that we had with the United States. Suddenly you think things that had never been seen, even in our darkest hour time, what Bibi Netanyahu is talking about the Americans, how Americans are talking about Netanyahu. Now, Amos, you saw this, the armaments video. Maybe the prime minister is right. Maybe it's time to sort of bang on the table. Because at the end of the day, most of the Democrats are progressives. I think it's like with a barefoot beating at a concrete wall. Imagine now if I kicked a concrete wall, I would break my foot. let's say that you are making this very serious speech. Is there going to be an earthquake in the United States? Will the Congress collapse? What do you mean? Who works like that? Who talks like that? We have, with the United States, managed not only a general relationship, a military intel relationship, cooperation through many, many years. If you want to now provoke the American president, you will get exactly the opposite. We had a crisis with our U.S. relations about China. Now, if you threaten the American president in some irresponsible, insane way that's meant to humiliate the Americans, that would harm our national security. I'll give you examples. Iran attacked us with over 300 missiles. The IDF, held the line. The United States helped us. European states, even Arab states that we maybe shouldn't talk about them, they also helped. There's a strategic alliance called CENTCOM, which is managed by the Americans. The chief of general staff of the IDF can meet with any chief of general staff of Arab militaries. We have Egypt, which is the terrible sort of enemy of Israel, so to speak, but is mediated by the Americans. The Americans help in so many ways and has enormous ramifications. To provoke the President of the United States will not bring us any benefit and will only harm us terribly. Noam, what do you think? I agree with every word. The Supreme Court here, you're going to sign off on that? I don't think that we have a checkbook out to buy American armaments. The amazing chutzpah, the amazing rudeness, that everything that the Americans have given us from October 8th are paid by the American taxpayer, not by Israeli taxpayers. 18 billion, 14 billion in special aid by President Biden, 7.5 billion of which have already arrived. So the amazing audacity to think that you will speak that way to somebody who helped. It's not as if we paid up front the money and they didn't deliver our supplies. They sent their own supplies. The United States of America took from their own supplies in order to help us, and we would have the nerve to behave that way? That is a humiliation to the state of Israel. I am ashamed to be Israeli in a way that dares to speak that way to the United States of America, that has given us the most support and has given us the most support continuously. By the way, in regards to the fact why since then Eisenhower and so forth, and we're talking about the building force. Wait a second, if I may talk about the plane carriers, 35 planes, dozens of combat marine vessels. Think about all of that. Think of all of the armaments for the 3 months period. We only look at what they gave us. Day by day by day, American Air Force were here, were present. How could we possibly imagine? I mean, there were daily, when the American president, when President Biden says something, it's delivered, it's done. His word is law. And I mean, it's amazing to me that we would think to provoke the Americans when they're helping us. Noam, I want to ask you about something else. It's no secret your family lived in the Gaza border area. You on the 8th of October on the 7th of October went to save them. And yet maybe Netanyahu is still right that he wants to continue the war until there won't be a specific threat on Amir Tibon and your grandchildren in Nahal Oz. Maybe this is directly related to your particular experience. What's wrong with that? I am a graduate of Lebanon. I know how you can get mired in the mud. Some of the process that we underwent in this particular war, and generally in Israel, we don't need long wars here in Israel. We need short wars, intense wars, and get a strategic achievement as quickly as possible and come to an agreement as quickly as possible, because that's the end of every war, an agreement. The same is true of the North. There could be a war now. We will pay a terrible price, and at the end, we'll have to come to an agreement that is pretty much like the agreement we offered now. If in the beginning of the war they'd said, okay, Our goal is to eradicate the Hamas's base of power, to replace it with a different government in Gaza, to bring back our hostages, do all of this in a specific time frame, and all of this in collaboration with the Americans and Egypt and so forth. We would be in a different reality right now. What Netanyahu and his extreme government are leading. Some are even talking about military regime in Gaza. We don't even have the military might to do it. They're talking about renewing settlements in Gaza. What he's going to do, he and his extreme government, is to bring us, to mire us in such mud, so to speak, that we will never get out of it. The residents of Nahal Oz and the kibbutzim in the Gaza border that I have worked with since the 8th of October, along with all of the other generals that and my colleagues, they will come home only when they feel safe. But that's exactly the question. That's exactly the question. If the IDF leaves Rafah in 2 weeks, and Amir asks you, Dad, do I come back home? What do you say? First of all, I personally will go back. The moment that Achal Oz, the residents go back, I'll go back with them. And if it's safe and the IDF concludes, I believe the IDF has got my back, we'll all come back. But they won't come back to Nahal Oz. There are still 2 hostages from Nahal Oz and from other kibbutzim. They won't come home without their hostages. Without their family members still in Gaza, they won't come home. In 2014, there were 52 days of the operation, Protective Edge, and we were day by day in cabinet meetings, in smaller cabinets and extended cabinets, and then the IDF chief of staff asked the prime minister, this current prime minister, how would you like to conclude this war? From day one, they asked. And they said, do this, do that. And then the IDF chief of staff, Benny Gantz, said, I would like to understand, you, prime minister, how would you like to conclude the war? At the last missile and the last bullet is fired, the last one, what situation should the IDF be in? What is our goal? He didn't get an answer for 52 days. Because the prime minister didn't want to give an answer. At the end of that war, head of the Mossad, as head of the Mossad, moderate states contacted me and said, we are willing to rehabilitate the Gaza Strip. You dictate the terms, but we'll only give you one condition. Let us conclude the Palestinian-Israeli war in a way that you, the state of Israel, would approve of. You, Israel, determine what is the border and what are your conditions. And Israel refused. If Israel had agreed back then, we wouldn't be sitting here now talking about what we're talking about. Here, if you would allow me to disagree, but you saw the Hamas, I don't know if any kind of agreement would have created a different reality. Wait, it's a political debate, and Amos, I recall, you used to be sort of an angry prophet in regards to the Hamas, and with dire prophecies of doom and gloom. But if you could decide or recommend to the next prime minister, if we ever have a next prime minister, about the first 3 things that person needs to do in order to improve and change the strategic situation, the geopolitical situation, and maybe the psychiatric well-being of Israel, what would you say? I would immediately talk to the President of the United States and say, what do we do about Iran? How do we collaborate with the Americans? The Iranians are determined. It's not some slogan of war or motto of war. They are dangerous, and I think we have to work with the Americans against Iran. Second, the Judea and Samaria, there are 2 goals. First of all, of the IDF, the intelligence directorate of the IDF and the ISA, and secondly, and they are doing their work every day, and that is amazing work, and that is why we are not being blown up because. And on the other hand, you have Smotrich, who is a very talented man. He is trying to destroy the Palestinian Authority. He's trying to pave the way for the collapse and the immediate occupation of the Gaza Strip, a quiet and very aggressive takeover of the civil administration. The civil administration and his amazing organization, force, the ability to balance out our needs, and they are rushing ahead to occupation, direct occupation, and that will turn us, that will make us defenseless against the international community and the international courts, which are already talking about. And the same in Gaza. Instead of wasting the lives of IDF soldiers, we have to enlist human capital on the Palestinian and Egyptian side as well in order to rehabilitate. This would cost us, but cost us less. And secondly, we have to combine national wisdom with national resilience and work and tackle far larger issues. Iran the first, but there are many others, because apart from that rationale and force, at the moment we're not applying any of our strengths. We're not utilizing any of our capabilities. Is there anything that you would like to say that you haven't said? I think what's important to say is that with the difficult situation we are in, and I saw this on October 7th and October 8th, when the IDF didn't work and the government didn't function. But we do have a strong nation, a good nation, that is willing to enlist and volunteer in remarkable ways. So if we are wise enough to change this government, to replace this government, and for people to take responsibility, because that's the kind of culture we should have, when people take responsibility, then we can tackle every military or existential threat, as long as we do it according to security doctrine of a strong military, a strong country, a strong state, and a strong democracy, and a strategic alliance with the US. If we manage to keep to those principles, no one will be able to take us down. Tamir, as a final question, as a journalist, I'm all about, of course, current events, and this now issue, the submarine scandal. Through your military career, have you managed to understand this grant to the Germans to sell submarines to the Egyptians? I don't want to address that, but you came all the way. I knew that's what you would say. You knew what my answer would be. In 1973, Israel proved to all of the Arab states that it is unbeatable, and that is the reason to the peace. Yes, the peace in Egypt and Jordan, and from Oman to Morocco, it reverberated. And on October 7th, that the tables were turned. Suddenly, we understood, and people understood, that Israel can be hit, the same hit that Ben-Gurion warned us about on day one when he began his position as Prime Minister of Israel. And this did happen. October 7 happened. We should grasp that. We should understand we have a brief time window to change direction again. And sadly, the Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, is making sure that we are only beating ourselves. We are only vanquishing ourselves. Amos, say something optimistic. Say if there's a war with the Hezbollah, who's going to win? The person who prevents it by making it needless and redundant. We can beat the Hezbollah, sure, but the price will be terrible. And I'll tell you what drives me mad. Sinwar, that horrific person with his tunnel sitting in the very depth of the 15, floors below ground. And I was, born in Khan Yunis. I managed to put a wedge between Israel and the US. I managed to undermine Jordan. I managed to undermine Egypt. I'm stopping at peace with the Saudis. Maybe, I think he's concluding his position here, his time here in the world, and he should pass on to the next world. Maybe he'll also be able to eradicate the Palestinian Authority and continue to silf in the Gulf. And the Hamas, their idea to work, and this was thought of by the Iranians, I think Tamir mentioned this earlier, and I think it was mentioned earlier. Can it be that they say, wait a moment, we can harm Israel? That's crazy to me, that horrific person is sitting there and consolidating a strategy. And I would like to have a consolidated strategy in Israel, which we don't have. Finally, I want a word here, the word accountability, to be the word of the day. Accountability should be the word we use today. I had a very similar forum in the Herzliya conference last year. I believe you were, and Gadi Eisenkot as well was there. And no one even believed or imagined that a year later we would sit here in this reality. So all I'm left by saying to conclude our discussion is hopefully next year, I hope we are in a much better situation. Thank you all.